Hey there, history buffs and curious souls. Before we plunge into the bizarre and the grotesque, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on the wild ride we're about to take. Trust me, you'll want to stick around because we're diving into some jaw-dropping medieval oddities that are sure to make your skin crawl, or at the very least, keep your eyes wide open. Ever heard of the punishment known as flaying? Yes, that's right, skinning people alive was a thing back in the day. Or how about the medieval practice of trial by ordeal? Imagine having to carry a red-hot iron bar to prove your innocence. Sounds like a bad reality show, right? What were they thinking? But wait, there's more. Did you know that in ancient Rome, some people believed that a good way to cure a headache was to crush a live frog and apply it to your forehead? Yummy! Or that during the Middle Ages, it was considered totally acceptable to have public executions as a form of entertainment. Who knew death could be so festive? Now, let's talk about some truly shocking disasters. Picture this: in 1628, a massive storm sank the Vasa, a warship that was supposed to be unsinkable. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Can you imagine the embarrassment when they had to fish it out of the water? So, grab your favorite snack, or maybe a stiff drink, and prepare for a journey through time filled with bizarre facts and specific dates. Ever wondered what weird sexual practices were considered normal in ancient cultures? Or how many ways people have found to punish each other creatively? Don't forget to hit that loop button, so this episode can play until you drift off into a dream filled with medieval absurdities. Ready to get weird? Let's go! The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. Ah, the Middle Ages. A time of chivalry, knights in shining armor, and dust inspections. Yes, indeed. As we delve into the riveting realm of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, prepare yourself for a tale filled with absurdity, peculiar practices, and the occasional eye-roll-worthy anecdote. Early records, an unremarkable beginning. Our story begins in the bustling town of London in the year 1250. The Guild of Dust and Filth, a surprisingly influential organization, was birthed in the wake of the Great Plague. It was believed that dust, in its various forms, was a carrier of disease and must be monitored with the intensity of a hawk eyeing a hapless mouse. Why, you may ask, would a guild dedicated to dust exist? Well, consider this: dust was everywhere. It clung to the rafters of grand cathedrals, settled on the wares of esteemed merchants, and, heaven forbid, floated into the nostrils of the town's esteemed nobility. Thus, the guild members, armed with feather dusters and a singular mission, set forth on their quest to corral this insidious menace. Their motto: "A speck of dust today is a plague tomorrow." The dusty protocols of 1285. Fast forward to 1285, and the Guild of Dust and Filth had established a set of rigorous inspection protocols in the town of York. Each guild member was required to check the dust levels in their workshop every fortnight. Yes, you heard that right, every fortnight. Imagine the excitement. The inspection process was rather simple. 1. Dust measurement. Each workshop was equipped with a dustometer, a fancy term for a stick with a rag tied to the end. If the rag returned dirtier than a peasant in a pigsty, it was deemed unsatisfactory. 2. Dust collection. Guild members were required to collect their dust samples in small glass vials labeled with the date, time, and mood of the dust, because, why not? 3. Public display, the most outrageous rule. Dust collected from inspections had to be displayed in a public square on the first Saturday of every month. Nothing screams community engagement quite like a public viewing of collected dust. But what if a workshop failed the inspection? Oh, the horror! They faced a fine of 3 pence or, worse, the dreaded, dusty dagger, a ceremonial item that was essentially a heavy feather duster used to publicly shame the offender. One can just imagine the scene. Oh, look, there goes old Thomas with his dusty dagger. Shameful. A peculiar case, the Great Dust Scandal of 1321. The year 1321 marked a turning point in the history of dust inspection. Enter one Reginald of Wessex, a rather ambitious guild member who believed he could game the dust inspection system. During one fateful inspection, Reginald decided to replace his dust with flour, claiming it was merely a culinary dust. The inspectors, none the wiser, passed him without issue. However, during a subsequent town banquet, a rather unfortunate incident occurred. A gust of wind swept through the hall, sending clouds of flour dust into the air. It turned out that Reginald had not only been cheating but had unwittingly created the first ever medieval food fight. Imagine the chaos: nobles choking on flour, peasants sneezing uncontrollably, and Reginald, in the center of it all, desperately trying to explain that he was simply inspiring culinary creativity. Naturally, the guild was none too pleased, and Reginald faced the wrath of both the guild and the public. The scandal resulted in the introduction of the flour clause in 1322, which stated that any dust must be of natural origin, effectively banning any food-related particles from workshops. Reginald? He was forever known as Reginald the Dusty, and became somewhat of a local legend. The Dust Wars of 1350. As if the guild's dusty drama wasn't enough, the year 1350 ushered in the infamous Dust Wars. Rival guilds sprang up across England, each claiming to have the most superior dust inspection methods. The Guild of Dust and Filth faced fierce competition from the Guild of Pristine Cleanliness, which prided itself on their no-dust policy. What does a no-dust policy entail, you ask? 1. Daily inspections. Guild members were required to inspect their workshops every day, because who needs sleep when there's dust lurking about? 2. Dust-free zones. They declared certain areas as dust-free zones, where no dust was allowed to enter. This included all taverns, markets, and, shockingly, even the local church. 3. Dust banishment. A rather extreme measure involved banishing any member who dared to have even a speck of dust in their workshop. Talk about high stakes. As tensions rose, the guild members resorted to increasingly absurd tactics to outdo one another. In one memorable incident, a guild member from the Guild of Pristine Cleanliness attempted to eliminate their competition by hiring a group of rogue pigeons to scatter dust around the competition's workshop. Sadly, the plan backfired, as the pigeons ended up taking an unexpected detour into the local bakery, sending flour flying everywhere. The dust inspection bonanza of 1400. By the dawn of the 15th century, dust inspections had transformed into a festivity called the Dust Inspection Bonanza. Imagine this: townspeople gathered to watch guild members parade their dust collections, adorned with colorful ribbons and accompanied by lively music. 1. Dust pageantry. Each member would showcase their dust, now more like a bizarre art exhibit, in a competition for the title of Dusty Monarch. 2. Dust crafts. Workshops began offering dust crafts classes, where people created intricate art pieces using various types of dust. 3. Dust Olympics. And let's not forget the Dust Olympics, where guild members competed in various dust-related events, including dust tossing and dust hurdling. What a sight it must have been! But amidst the revelry, one can only wonder, was this truly a celebration of dust, or a bizarre distraction from more pressing issues like famine, war, or, dare we say, the Black Death lurking just around the corner? The dwindling influence and the rise of sanitary standards. By the late 15th century, the influence of the guilds began to wane. The advent of the Renaissance brought forth a wave of fresh ideas. Sanitation and hygiene began to take precedence over dust inspection protocols. In 1485, the Guild of Dust and Filth was finally disbanded, replaced by a more practical approach to cleanliness, the introduction of the first public health standards. Dust inspections were reduced to a mere formality, and the once vibrant parades transformed into dreary government inspections. How the mighty had fallen! The whimsical Dust Olympics were replaced by the dull sound of bureaucratic quills scratching on parchment. Conclusion: a legacy of laughs and lessons. As we look back on the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, one must marvel at the absurdity and humor that permeated this dusty chapter of history. From the dramatic flower scandals to the flamboyant dust inspection bonanza, these guilds remind us that even the most mundane aspects of life can become a source of entertainment and community. So, the next time you find yourself in a dusty room, take a moment to appreciate the fine art of dust. After all, it has borne witness to some of the most bizarre and entertaining tales of our past. And remember, as the great philosopher probably didn't say, a speck of dust may just be a spark of history waiting to be uncovered. #### The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. The medieval guild system, often romanticized as a bastion of craftsmanship and community, had a more mundane and dusty underbelly, namely, the guild dust inspection protocols. While we often picture gallant knights and noble artisans, it's hard to imagine them wading through clouds of dust, but alas, that was part of the job. Let's delve into the details of this unremarkable, yet oddly fascinating, facet of medieval life. ####### Construction methods and materials, 12th to 15th centuries. In the heart of medieval cities, construction methods were governed by the guilds, which dictated everything from the techniques used to the materials employed. The primary construction materials included wood, stone, and clay, with each guild specializing in its own domain. Wood, carpenters relied on local timber, often oak or elm, for frames and structures. Joinery methods included mortise and tenon, dovetail joints, and the occasional use of iron nails. Dust generated from wood shavings was common, and inspectors often found themselves knee-deep in shavings and sawdust. Stonemasons carved intricately from limestone, granite, and sandstone. The dust from stone cutting was fine and pervasive, making it a particular nuisance during inspections. Clay. Potters and brickmakers used clay for pottery and building materials. The dust from clay was both gritty and sticky, bonding to surfaces and making inspections a laborious endeavor. Costs for building materials varied dramatically based on location and quality. A simple wooden beam could cost around 2 shillings, while a finely carved stone might run upwards of 10 shillings per block. However, the true cost of construction was not just financial. The labor involved in ensuring compliance with guild standards was substantial. As you can imagine, the sight of guild members trudging through their dust-laden workshops inspired many a quaint tavern story. Did you hear about the carpenter who mistook his own sawdust for gold? He's still searching for that fortune. ###### Bureaucratic rules and punishments, 13th to 15th centuries. The bureaucratic structure surrounding guild dust inspection was labyrinthine and often comically ineffective. Guilds operated under strict rules, and failing to adhere to the dust inspection protocols could lead to severe repercussions. 1. Inspection frequency. Inspections were mandated biannually, coinciding with the harvest festivals. This timing was strategic. After all, the dust would be at its peak just before the festivities, giving inspectors a reason to show their faces at the local alehouse. 2. Compliance standards. Each guild had its own dusty standards, with specific types and quantities of acceptable dust. For instance, the Guild of Carpenters allowed for a mere 3 cubic feet of wood dust per workshop, while the Guild of Stonemasons had a far stricter limit of 1 cubic foot of stone dust. 3. Punishments. The penalties for failing inspection varied widely. Fines. Offenders could be fined anywhere from 2 to 10 shillings, depending on the severity of the dust situation. Public shaming. Repeat offenders faced public scorn, sometimes resulting in their being paraded through the streets with a sign that read, "Dusty Delinquent," hung around their necks. Banishment from the guild. In extreme cases, continued violations could result in expulsion from the guild, a fate worse than a bad haircut in a medieval town. The inspectors, often seen as the dust police, were both revered and reviled. Their role was akin to that of the modern-day building inspector, but with the added complexity of navigating guild politics. ##### Roles and job descriptions, 14th to 15th centuries. The organizational hierarchy of guild dust inspection was neither grand nor glamorous. The roles were often filled by individuals with a penchant for nitpicking and a strong aversion to dust bunnies. 1. Chief Inspector. Appointed by the Guild Council, the Chief Inspector oversaw all dust inspections. This person was often a veteran artisan with a keen eye for detail and a formidable mustache. It was said that a well-groomed mustache was a sign of a capable inspector. 2. Assistant inspectors. A team of assistant inspectors aided the chief inspector, often comprising junior guild members eager to prove their worth. They were tasked with measuring dust levels and documenting findings. Humorously, their main qualification seemed to be an uncanny ability to sneeze on cue. 3. Dust monitors. These were the unsung heroes of the guild. Charged with daily dust assessments, they ensured that workshops didn't become too dusty between inspections. They were often equipped with handheld brushes and a variety of dust-catching devices that resembled medieval fly swatters. 4. Record keepers. Every inspection needed documentation. Record keepers maintained meticulous logs of dust levels and inspections, ensuring that no workshop went unchecked. With quills in hand, they recorded the comings and goings of dust and inspectors alike, often leading to the creation of what was essentially the medieval equivalent of a dust diary. While these roles were crucial, they were also fraught with tension. The inspectors were constantly battling the dust, while the artisans were equally determined to keep their creative spaces functional. One could say it was a dusty dance, albeit without the grace of a waltz. Hashtag technical specs and inventories, 15th century. The technical specifications for dust inspection protocols were as precise as the artisan's craft allowed. Dust measurement tools were rudimentary yet effective. Here's a glimpse into the equipment used for inspections. Dust measure, a simple wooden box with a lid to capture dust during inspections. Designed to hold exactly 1 cubic foot, it was often carried by inspectors like a badge of honor. Sifting screens, used to separate fine dust from larger debris, these screens were a necessity for stonemasons, who needed to ensure their workspace remained compliant. Quill and ink, the primary tools for documentation, scribes used these to keep track of dust levels and inspection results. The ink, however, had a tendency to smudge, leading to the occasional confusion over whether a workshop was actually compliant or just dusty enough. Dust brooms, crafted from locally sourced twigs, these brooms were essential for the daily upkeep of workshops. Each guild had its own design, with some boasting ornate handles carved from the finest oak. The inventories maintained by guilds were often exhaustive, detailing every tool, material, and dust-related item in the workshop. A typical inventory might include 3 dust measures, 5 sifting screens, 12 brooms, 2 quills, with a side of ink, of course. Interestingly, the most coveted item on any guild inventory was the golden dust measure, a mythical tool said to grant its owner immunity from inspections. Spoiler alert, it never existed. Hashtag conclusion. The history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols may not be the stuff of legends, but it is a reflection of the societal structures that governed daily life in the Middle Ages. While artisans labored to create masterpieces, they also contended with the ever-present threat of dust and the inspectors who wielded their measuring boxes like swords. So, the next time you think of the medieval era, remember that behind every great work of art or architecture lay a swarm of dust, a cadre of inspectors, and a series of rules that were as confounding as they were essential. In the grand tapestry of history, perhaps the most overlooked stories are those that, while dusty, reveal the true grit of human endeavor. And while the guilds may have faded into history, the spirit of meticulousness, and a good dose of humor, remains timeless. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, where knights clashed swords and peasants toiled in the fields, one might imagine that the most riveting dramas unfolded on the battlefield or in the castle halls. However, lurking in the shadows, quite literally, was the unsung saga of dust inspection protocols enforced by guilds. This tale, while not filled with heroics or romance, weaves a narrative of construction methods, bureaucratic rules, and the everyday minutiae that shaped the lives of craftsmen across Europe. ### construction methods, materials, and costs. The medieval guilds, flourishing from the 12th to the 16th centuries, were essentially trade associations that regulated the myriad of professions, including blacksmiths, bakers, and weavers. As guilds expanded, so did their responsibilities, leading to the development of dust inspection protocols. These protocols were implemented to ensure that the dust generated from the production processes did not contaminate the air or produce unsightly messes that could tarnish the reputation of the trade. Materials and methods *. 1. Construction materials *. Wood *, the primary building material for workshops. Oak was favored for its strength, while pine was often used for structural beams. Stone * used for more permanent structures, particularly in urban centers. Limestone and granite were common, though costly. Thatch *, a roofing material made from dried straw or reeds, which was not only cheap but also made for a cozy workshop, until it caught fire. 2. Dust generation processes *. Weaving *, the clattering of looms produced substantial textile dust, necessitating frequent inspections. Smithing *, sparks and fine metal dust were byproducts of hammering iron, requiring stringent cleanup protocols. Baking * flour dust from mills and bakeries could lead to respiratory issues, prompting guilds to establish hygiene standards. Costs *. Initial construction of a workshop could range from 5 to 50 marks, depending on size and materials. Dust inspection fees were modest, typically a few pence, but non-compliance could lead to fines or worse, a guild's expulsion, which was the medieval equivalent of being kicked out of a Facebook group. ### bureaucratic rules and punishments. The bureaucracy of medieval guilds, truly the stuff of legends, if only for the sheer tedium it inspired. With the rise of guilds came an intricate web of regulations, designed to maintain order and quality. The dust inspection protocols were no exception. Guild rules *. 1. Inspection frequency *. Inspections were mandated at least once a month, with additional checks during peak production seasons. In towns like Bruges, circa 1340, this was a well-oiled machine, while in smaller villages, it was more like a cat-herding exercise. 2. Documentation asterisk. Craftsmen were required to maintain logs detailing dust cleanup activities. Failing to do so could lead to penalties, as it was believed that an unrecorded dust particle was a step toward chaos. 3. Quality standards asterisk. A specific dust threshold was established. For instance, in the year 1455, the Guild of Bakers of London stipulated that any bakery producing more than a quarter pound of dust per 100 loaves would be fined. Punishments asterisk. Fines asterisk. These ranged from 1 to 10 pence, depending on the severity of the dust offense. The guild's treasurer was often seen as the community's least favorite figure, akin to a medieval tax collector. Community service asterisk. Offenders could be mandated to sweep the town square, a punishment that was as humiliating as it was labor-intensive. Temporary suspension asterisk. Repeat offenders faced suspension from the guild, which could be devastating in a time when community and trade were intertwined. Hashtag roles and job descriptions. Within the guilds, a hierarchy existed, and each role contributed to the enforcement of dust inspection protocols. 1. Master Craftsman asterisk. The top dog of the workshop, responsible for overseeing production and compliance with guild rules. Masters were often the most skilled in their craft, but they also had to be adept at managing dust, essentially the dust czar of their domain. 2. Journeyman asterisk. A skilled worker who had completed an apprenticeship. Journeymen were often tasked with the bulk of the inspection preparation, ensuring that dust cleanup was done before the master's visit, a role akin to being the designated driver on a group outing. 3. Apprentice asterisk. The rookies in the trade, apprentices, were responsible for mundane tasks, including the sweeping and cleaning necessary to present a dust-free environment. They learned the craft while keeping the place spick and span, a real 2-for-1 deal. 4. Guild Inspector asterisk. An appointed official who conducted inspections. These individuals had the unenviable task of measuring dust levels, often using a crude but effective method involving a white cloth. If the cloth came back gray, the guild inspector was known to sigh heavily, as if they'd just discovered a rat in the pantry. Hashtag technical specs and inventories. Dust inspection protocols were not merely a set of whimsical rules, they involved technical specifications that dictated the standards for cleanliness. Inspection tools asterisk. 1. Dust cloths asterisk. Clean, white cloths were the primary tool. Inspections involved wiping surfaces and assessing the color of the cloth post-wipe. A gray cloth. That was grounds for a stern talking to. 2. Dust measuring devices asterisk. Some guilds experimented with rudimentary devices to quantify dust, though most relied on the human eye. The more astute inspectors could even gauge dust levels by the amount of sneezing in the workshop. 3. Inventory lists asterisk. Workshops were mandated to keep inventories of cleaning supplies, which might include brooms, cloths, and other cleaning agents. A typical inventory list might look like this. 5 brooms, 2 for daily use, 3 for emergencies. 10 dust cloths, must be washed weekly. 1 dustpan, to be used only by the master craftsman. Regulation compliance *. Guilds maintained strict records of compliance, and inspectors were often required to submit detailed reports post-inspection. These reports included dust levels observed * ranging from acceptable to you might as well be baking in a sandstorm. Recommendations for improvement * inspectors would often suggest additional cleaning days or changes in production methods, though their suggestions sometimes went unheeded, leading to creative interpretations of acceptable dust. Conclusion, a dusty legacy. The history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, while seemingly mundane, offers a glimpse into the complexities of life in the Middle Ages. The meticulous attention to dust regulation reflects a broader cultural commitment to quality and community standards that defined the era. Though these protocols may not have produced heroic epics or romantic ballads, they ensured that the craftsmen of the day could produce their goods in a clean and orderly environment. In a world where a speck of dust could mean a tarnished reputation, the guilds took their responsibilities seriously. So, the next time you admire a finely crafted piece of medieval art or a perfectly baked loaf of bread, remember the invisible hands that kept the dust at bay, ensuring that quality flourished amid the grime. After all, behind every great masterpiece lies a story of relentless dust inspections, an unsung legacy that keeps on giving, one speck at a time. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. The medieval era, spanning approximately from the 5th to the late 15th century, was a time of burgeoning trade, skilled craftsmanship, and, of course, dust. Yes, dust, the oft-overlooked byproduct of industrious enterprises that, while rarely romanticized in tales of knights and nobles, played a crucial role in the day-to-day operations of guilds throughout Europe. Guild dust inspection protocols, though seemingly mundane, reveal a fascinating tapestry of construction methods, bureaucratic rules, job roles, and technical specifications. Buckle up, for we are about to embark on an unexpectedly riveting exploration of dust. Construction methods, materials, and costs. The foundation of any guild's operations was its workshop, where craftsmen toiled to produce goods ranging from textiles to tools. The construction methods of the time were rudimentary yet effective. Workshops were predominantly made from timber, with local stone and clay used for the more affluent guilds. By the late 14th century, brick became more common, especially in urban centers. Costs varied significantly based on location and materials. In 1300, a basic timber workshop in a small town might cost around 30 shillings, while a brick structure in a bustling city could run upwards of 200 shillings. This disparity prompted guilds to prioritize the cleanliness of their workspaces, as dust accumulation could mean costly repairs or even the loss of a workshop's license. Dust was not just a nuisance, it was a sign of inefficiency and neglect. The more dust present, the more likely a guild was to face scrutiny from local authorities. Thus, inspections became a regular part of guild life, with protocols established to ensure that dust remained at tolerable levels. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. As with any organized group, guilds developed bureaucratic rules to govern their members. The first recorded dust inspection protocol emerged in Paris around 1230, instituted by the Guild of Master Builders. This decree mandated biannual inspections, with fines levied against those found in violation of cleanliness standards. The fines ranged from 5 to 20 deniers, depending on the severity of the dust problem. If a guild member repeatedly failed to comply, they risked expulsion from the guild, a fate worse than death, when your livelihood depended on camaraderie and shared resources. In 1350, the Guild of Weavers in Florence took things a step further by introducing a dust accumulation tax, which assessed guild members for dust that exceeded the prescribed limits. This tax was particularly unpopular and led to the satirical saying, "Better a dirty loom than a clean pocket," highlighting the absurdity of taxing dust. Roles and job descriptions. Within the guilds, various roles were defined, and each member had specific responsibilities. The most notable positions concerning dust inspection included 1. Master Craftsman, the highest-ranking member, responsible for overall workshop cleanliness. Masters often delegated dust oversight to apprentices, but they were ultimately accountable for any infractions. 2. Apprentice, generally a young individual learning the trade. Apprentices were expected to maintain cleanliness, including sweeping and dusting. Their lack of interest often led to the saying, "An apprentice's broom is as lazy as his hand." 3. Dust inspector, a specialized role that emerged in the late 14th century. These inspectors were tasked with ensuring compliance with dust protocols. They wielded feather dusters and, on occasion, a sense of humor, as they often remarked, "Dust may be a sign of hard work, but it's also a sign of hard times." 4. The scribe, responsible for documenting the results of each inspection, scribes meticulously recorded dust levels and any fines imposed. Their records were often riddled with amusing anecdotes about guild members' attempts to hide their dust bunnies. 5. Custodian, although not always a formal title, custodians were often older guild members tasked with maintaining cleanliness. They were seen as the unsung heroes, armed with brooms and an unwavering commitment to dust-free workspaces. Technical specs and inventories. Dust inspection protocols were surprisingly technical for their time. By the 1400s, guilds began to standardize their approach to dust management. Inspections typically involved a thorough examination of the workshop, with specific criteria. Dust depth measurement. Inspectors used rudimentary rulers to gauge dust depth in corners and on surfaces, with a threshold of 2 mm established as acceptable. Should dust exceed this level, fines were imposed. Dust composition analysis. Some inspectors, particularly in London, experimented with rudimentary dust composition analysis, identifying dust from wood shavings, textile fibers, and even animal fur. A guild caught with a high concentration of textile dust faced immediate penalties, as this indicated sloppy work practices. Cleaning inventory. Guilds maintained detailed inventories of cleaning supplies, including brooms, cloths, and dustpans. By 1450, the Guild of Blacksmiths in Nuremberg had standardized their cleaning supplies, requiring each workshop to stock at least 3 brooms and 5 cloths at all times. Dust report cards. Inspectors issued dust report cards, which detailed the cleanliness of each workshop, complete with ratings from A, spotless, to F, dismal. A workshop receiving a D or lower risked public shaming, often resulting in a guild member being forced to wear a dusty badge during market days, a punishment that was both humiliating and effective. ####### The impact of dust on trade. Dust inspections were not merely a bureaucratic exercise, they had tangible effects on trade and commerce. A guild that maintained a reputation for cleanliness often attracted more customers, as buyers associated cleanliness with quality. Conversely, those caught in repeated dust violations could find themselves ostracized, unable to sell their goods in local markets. In 1385, the Guild of Bakers in Paris faced a scandal when a rogue baker was found to have a dust-ridden workshop, leading to a citywide inspection of all bakeries. The ensuing backlash resulted in a 20% drop in bread sales for the entire guild, proving that dust could indeed be a matter of life and livelihood. ####### Witty aside. It is perhaps ironic that while the medieval guilds poured so much energy into dust inspections, they were often oblivious to the larger issues at hand, like the fact that the plague was about to sweep through Europe. One can almost hear the dust inspectors lamenting, "If only we could sweep away disease as easily as we clean our workshops." ##### Conclusion. The history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols may lack the glamour of knightly quests or the intricacies of royal courts, but it offers a unique glimpse into the daily lives of craftsmen and the lengths they went to maintain their livelihoods. Through construction methods, bureaucratic rules, defined roles, and technical specifications, we see how dust, an unassuming byproduct, shaped the economic landscape of the Middle Ages. These protocols, while often tedious, help to foster a sense of community and accountability among guild members. The legacy of these dust inspectors lives on, reminding us that even the most mundane aspects of history have stories worth telling. After all, in the grand tapestry of history, it's often the small details that hold the most profound truths. So next time you spot a dust bunny scurrying across your floor, remember, somewhere in medieval Europe, a guild dust inspector would have been having a field day. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. In the bustling towns of medieval Europe, where cobblestones met the clatter of hooves and the air was thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and questionable hygiene, one might have expected the guilds to be at the forefront of innovation. Instead, they found themselves mired in a lackluster history of dust inspection protocols that would make even the most enthusiastic bureaucrat stifle a yawn. As we delve into the insipid details of this bygone era, prepare yourself for a whirlwind tour through the intricate web of construction methods, bureaucratic rules, and the surprisingly complex roles of those tasked with ensuring that dust, yes, dust, was kept in check. Construction methods, materials, and costs. The medieval guilds of the 12th to the 15th centuries were more than mere associations of craftsmen, they were the beating heart of urban economic life. Yet, amid the grand stonework and timber-framed houses, the dusty underbelly of their operations often went unnoticed. Construction methods varied dramatically between regions and guilds, but one common thread was the necessity for cleanliness in the production environment. 1. Construction methods *. Timber framing, 12th century. The most prevalent method involved using large timbers joined by pegs. Strangely, dust was often considered a sign of quality craftsmanship. Too much dust indicated a lack of care, while just the right amount suggested a well-used workshop. Stone masonry, 13th century. In stonecutting guilds, the dust from grinding was not just an annoyance but a potential hazard. Hence, inspections were instituted to ensure that the fine powder did not compromise the materials. After all, no one wants a collapsing cathedral because of a little too much stone dust. Brick construction, 14th century. The increasing use of fired bricks led to another layer of complexity. Guilds implemented dust control measures, which included the use of dampening methods to minimize airborne particles. 2. Materials *. Timber from oak, ash, and pine. Stone from local quarries, including limestone and granite. Clay for bricks, often mixed with straw to enhance structural integrity. 3. Costs *. A typical timber frame house could cost around £40, while a stone structure could escalate to £100, depending on the intricacy of the design. Dust control measures, while initially seen as an unnecessary expense, eventually became a standard part of guild assessments, adding an average of 5% to construction costs. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. With great power comes great responsibility, and the guilds were not lacking in the desire to impose rules, often ludicrously detailed, in the name of cleanliness. By the 14th century, guilds had formalized their dust inspection protocols into an array of bureaucratic rules that would have made even the most seasoned civil servant weep with joy. 1. Inspection protocols *. Dust levels * inspections measured dust levels using primitive instruments, often resembling oversized spoons. If dust exceeded a predetermined threshold, which, amusingly, was often set by the most dust-averse member of the guild, fines would ensue. Frequency of inspections * inspections were mandated bi-weekly, leading to the establishment of dust days, where the townsfolk would gather to witness the spectacle of dust inspectors armed with feather dusters and scrolls. 2. Punishments *. Fines * offending guild members faced fines ranging from 1 to 10 shillings, a significant amount at the time. Failure to pay could result in public shaming, where the offending craftsmen would be paraded around town with a sign proclaiming their dust-related sins. Work suspension * repeat offenders risked a temporary suspension from guild activities, an existential crisis for any craftsman whose livelihood depended on guild membership. Roles and job descriptions. In a world where dust reigned supreme, the roles within guilds expanded dramatically, each with a title that sounded more important than the last. The dust inspectors, often the lowest on the totem pole, held an unexpected amount of power in their hands, or rather, in their feather dusters. 1. Key roles *. Chief Dust Inspector, CDI, the highest-ranking official in the dust inspection hierarchy, responsible for setting the dust standards and overseeing inspections. The CDI was often a seasoned craftsman who had grown weary of sneezing through their work. Junior inspectors * apprentices who followed the CDI, armed with notebooks to record dust levels and fines. These young souls often dreamt of one day becoming CDIs, though many were stymied by the sheer monotony of their duties. Guild members * craftsmen who were subject to inspection. Their roles ranged from blacksmiths to bakers, but each was united by the common thread of dust-related penalties. 2. Job descriptions *. Chief Dust Inspector * must possess a keen eye for detail and a strong stomach for dust. Expected to conduct inspections without sneezing, a rare feat. Junior inspectors * must be able to count to 10 and know the difference between a dust bunny and a rat. A background in fine arts, e.g., painting or pottery, often preferred. Guild members * expected to maintain a dust-free workspace. Must learn to balance the artistry of their craft with the tedium of cleanliness. Technical specs and inventories. While the world was busy creating masterpieces, the guilds were obsessed with maintaining an inventory of dust control equipment and technical specifications that would make any modern-day quality assurance officer proud, if a bit bemused. 1. Technical specifications *. Dust measurement tools *. These consisted of rudimentary devices that measured the thickness of dust on work surfaces. The dust spoon, a measuring tool that was, ironically, often covered in dust itself, was the primary instrument. Dampening solutions * guilds experimented with various mixtures, ranging from water to vinegar, to create effective dust suppression methods. Some guilds even claimed to have discovered a magical elixir that would keep dust at bay, which, unsurprisingly, turned out to be just slightly damp cloths. 2. Inventories *. Dusting equipment * feather dusters, the most coveted, damp rags, and various brushes. A well-stocked guild could boast upwards of 20 dusters. Sanitation protocols * each guild maintained a log of their dust management practices, often leading to heated debates over the best methods. Some favored the vinegar approach, while others swore by the power of holy water. The legacy of dust inspection protocols. As the medieval era waned and the Renaissance dawned, the dust inspection protocols began to fade into obscurity, much like the dust they sought to control. The advent of new construction techniques and materials, coupled with a growing emphasis on artistic expression, rendered the dust protocols increasingly irrelevant. By the late 16th century, many guilds had dissolved, their once ardent focus on dust replaced by a newfound appreciation for creativity and innovation. However, the legacy of these protocols lives on in the annals of history, serving as a reminder that even the most mundane aspects of life can be steeped in bureaucracy and absurdity. The next time you find yourself dusting a shelf or sweeping a floor, spare a thought for the medieval guilds and their beleaguered dust inspectors, because, let's be honest, cleaning is a job that will never go out of style. As we close the dusty tome on this chapter of history, let us remember, though the dust may settle, the laughter of those who endured the trials of medieval guild dust inspection protocols will echo through the ages. After all, what's a little dust between friends, or guild members? Hashtag the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. Ah, the Middle Ages. A time of gallant knights, ethereal maidens, and, if you can believe it, an absolute obsession with dust. Yes, you read that right. Dust. While you might be thinking of grand castles, epic battles, and the occasional witch trial, lurking behind the scenes was a world of meticulous dust inspection protocols, particularly among guilds. This remarkable phenomenon, despite its utterly mundane nature, provides a fascinating glimpse into the regional variations, the laws governing these practices, and the bizarre anecdotes that make you wonder if perhaps you've stumbled into an alternate historical reality. Buckle up, it's going to be a dusty ride. Hashtag regional variations over time. The medieval guild system was a hodgepodge of local customs and regulations, sprouting up like mushrooms after a rain, each with its flavor of dust inspection protocol. In the bustling trade hubs of Flanders, guilds of weavers would carefully monitor the dust that settled on their looms, lest it taint their fine fabrics. Meanwhile, in the less urbane hinterlands of England, blacksmiths would sweep their workshops with all the fervor of a man whose life depended on the cleanliness of his anvil. In Paris, the guilds had a veritable dust czar, known as the Inspecteur de Poussière. This position was so prestigious that it often required a degree in dustology, a field that combined the study of dirt with the art of bureaucratic red tape. No surprise, then, that a thriving industry of dust inspectors emerged, each with their own idea of what constituted acceptable levels of dust. One guild's acceptable could easily be another's anathema. Over in Italy, the guilds took a more laissez-faire approach to dust, often claiming that a little dust added character to a work of art. However, this was no excuse for the Florentine bakers, who faced stern penalties for allowing flour dust, heaven forbid, to coat their shops. The Statuto dei Fornai decreed a fine of 2 denarii for every speck of flour dust found in a baker's establishment. This fine was enforced by the ever-vigilant Fratellanza della Polvere, a guild dedicated to the noble pursuit of cleanliness in all things culinary. If you thought modern health regulations were strict, just wait until you hear about their medieval counterparts. Hashtag laws, edicts, and taxes. As any good historian will tell you, where there's dust, there's a law, or at least a lawmaker who's terribly bored. The medieval period was rife with edicts designed to manage the cleanliness of guilds, each more convoluted than the last. For instance, the Ordinance of Dust Regulation in 1324 mandated that all guilds must maintain a logbook of dust inspections, complete with detailed entries on the type of dust, its origin, and the frequency of its appearance. This led to an explosion of paperwork that would make a modern accountant weep with envy. Guilds were required to hire scribes who could barely keep up with the dust they were meant to record. One scribe noted, "I have written more about dust than I care to, and yet my quill remains perpetually dusted." But it didn't stop there. Taxes on dust were also a thing. Yes, you heard that right. In 1345, King Edward III imposed a dust tax on all trades, which required guilds to pay a fee proportional to the amount of dust they produced. This tax was calculated based on the weight of the dust collected, because nothing says progressive taxation like taxing the very particles that get caught in your throat during a sneeze. Imagine the chaos: guild members hastily sweeping their floors, collecting dust in sacks, and weighing it on rickety scales while muttering curses under their breath. One guild, the Society of Soiled Silks, was particularly adept at fabricating dust weights to minimize their tax burdens, leading to a flurry of lawsuits that would make even the most seasoned lawyer roll his eyes. Hashtag logistics and supply chains. Now, let's pivot to logistics, the unsung hero of the guild dust inspection saga. The movement of goods, be it freshly milled flour or finely spun silk, was a logistical nightmare. Dust inspection protocols dictated that goods be transported in specially designed dust-proof barrels. These barrels were crafted by the Barrel Makers Guild, which ironically was one of the dustiest trades around. The supply chains worked like a well-oiled machine, if you squinted hard enough and ignored the occasional breakdown due to a rogue gust of wind. The Guild of Dust Transporters was responsible for ensuring that all goods arriving at their destinations were inspected for dust. If a shipment was found to be too dusty, it was sent back, much like how you might reject a pizza with pineapple on it. To ensure compliance, guilds employed a series of dust guards, individuals whose only job was to stand by the loading docks, waving their feather dusters like flags of cleanliness. These dust guards were known to engage in fierce debates over the acceptable limits of dust, often resulting in dust-related brawls that would make medieval tavern fights look like a friendly game of charades. Hashtag record keeping with lots of specifics. Record keeping. The true love story of the medieval bureaucrat. The guilds took their dust logs seriously, and the pages of their ledgers read like a poetic ode to grime. Every guild was required to maintain a meticulous account of their dust inspections, complete with the date, time, type of dust, flour, soot, etc., and any fines levied for non-compliance. The Guild of Scribes had a particular fondness for this task, often embellishing their logs with ornate illustrations of dust particles, which, let's face it, looked suspiciously like random splotches of ink. An entry might read, "On the 12th of June, the dust was predominantly flour and appeared in a most irregular clump, warranting a fine of 3 denarii." What's more, these records were sometimes read aloud at guild meetings, much to the chagrin of those who craved a bit more excitement in their lives. Last week, we collected 1.5 ounces of soot dust from the forge, one guildmaster would announce, and a ripple of applause would ensue, akin to the enthusiasm you'd find at a particularly riveting lecture on the history of tax codes. Hashtag one surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, let's not pretend this dusty affair is all about regulations and record keeping. There's always room for a grotesque tale or two, and the world of medieval guild dust inspection does not disappoint. Consider the Guild of Candle Makers, a group known for their exquisite wax creations and equally exquisite penchant for dust accumulation. One fateful inspection day, a particularly zealous dust guard decided to take his duties to an extreme. He arrived at the guild's workshop, armed with a feather duster and a mission, only to find that the guild had been experimenting with a new kind of scented wax, one made from the rendered fat of animals. As the dust guard conducted his inspection, he inadvertently knocked over a large vat of this experimental wax, causing it to spill all over the floor. Amidst the chaos, the wax mixed with the dust, creating what can only be described as a dusty candle wax slurry. The ensuing scene was a blend of slapstick comedy and horror, as guild members slipped and slid through the mixture, desperately trying to salvage their livelihoods while simultaneously trying to avoid becoming a part of the most grotesque candlemaking accident in history. The dust guard, realizing his mistake, attempted to flee but ended up in a pile of the very substance he was meant to inspect. The tale of the candle catastrophe of 1378 would go down in guild lore, often recounted with exaggerated flair, as guild members cackled over mugs of ale, reminiscing about the day dust became their undoing. ####. Conclusion. And there you have it, a brief, yet detailed foray into the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. It's a rich tapestry woven with regional variations, laws that would make a modern-day bureaucrat's head spin, logistics that rival our current supply chains, and record-keeping that puts your average accountant to shame. Plus, who could forget the candle-making fiasco that brought a new meaning to getting your hands dirty? So, the next time you find yourself sneezing in a dusty room, take a moment to thank the medieval guilds for their valiant efforts in the name of cleanliness. After all, if they could endure the trials and tribulations of dust inspection protocols, surely we can survive a little household dust without losing our minds. Title: The Lackluster History of Medieval Guild Dust Inspection Protocols. The Middle Ages. A time of chivalry, plague, and, believe it or not, dust. Yes, dear reader, beneath the romanticized tales of knights and fair maidens lies a gritty reality involving dust inspection protocols that would make even the most apathetic bureaucrat shed a tear of joy. Dust was no mere nuisance back then, it was the linchpin of trade, commerce, and, dare I say, social standing. So, grab your quills and prepare your ledgers as we embark on a dusty journey through the ages, exploring the regional variations, the law-laden edicts, and the ghastly anecdotes that make up the history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. #### Regional variations over time. Let's start with a little context. While you might think that dust is dust, we must remember that medieval Europe was a patchwork quilt of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities, each with its own quirks and eccentricities. Take England, for instance. The dust in London was a far cry from that of, say, the quaint little town of Stratford-upon-Avon. In London, where the air was thick with the soot of industry, the inspection protocols focused largely on the types of dust that could be sold as premium quality for the burgeoning textile industry. Guilds of dyers, weavers, and even bakers had their own specific dust criteria, turning the mundane into a matter of life and death. Well, not quite, but you get the idea. Meanwhile, in the Italian city-states, dust inspections were a theatrical affair. The guilds took their dust very seriously, with elaborate ceremonies to ensure that only the finest particles graced their wares. The merchants of Florence were known to require their dust to be inspected by a panel of esteemed guild members, complete with a ceremonial feather duster, lest they faced the wrath of a disgruntled customer. And don't even get me started on the dust regulations of Bruges, where the guilds employed an entire cadre of dust spotters whose sole job was to sift through the subterranean layers of the marketplace. As we hopscotch through time, we find that these regional differences persisted, often evolving into distinct laws, edicts, and taxes that governed the dust trade. The dust from a reputable guild could fetch a higher price, while dubious origins could lead to fines or even imprisonment. In short, if you thought your local dust bunnies were a nuisance, try navigating the minefield of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. ##### laws, edicts, taxes, ledgers. Ah, the thrilling world of medieval legislation. Nothing quite screams excitement like a good dust inspection law. Throughout the ages, local governments were keen to regulate the dust trade, leading to a veritable smorgasbord of laws that would make even the most committed law student roll their eyes. For instance, in 1365, the City of London decreed that all dust merchants must maintain detailed ledgers of their dust sources, including the types of materials used and the location of collection. Imagine the joy of a clerk tasked with cataloging the origins of every speck of dust. The taxes associated with dust were equally riveting. The infamous dust tax of 1452 in France mandated that any merchant caught selling inferior dust would be fined not only for the quality of their product but also for the loss of local prestige. This led to the rise of dust consultants, who would charge exorbitant fees to ensure that merchants didn't inadvertently sell subpar products. Much like today's consultants who promise to optimize your business by simply rearranging your office furniture, these medieval experts were masters at making dust sound glamorous. In the realm of record-keeping, the guilds developed elaborate ledgers to track dust inspections. Each entry was a mini-epic in itself, detailing everything from the dust's origin to its final destination. A typical entry might read, "On the 12th day of March, in the year 1478, Sir Reginald of the Weavers' Guild inspected the dust from the looms of Lady Beatrice." Noted, a hint of lavender with a suspiciously high level of cat fur. Recommendation: do not sell to the nobility. These records were not just for show, they were crucial for maintaining the guild's reputation and, by extension, its economic prosperity. #### logistics and supply chains. Of course, no medieval guild could function without a solid logistics strategy. Dust inspection wasn't just a matter of looking at a pile of particles, it required a finely tuned supply chain that rivaled the modern-day Amazon Prime delivery system, well, sort of. The journey from dust collection to inspection to sale was fraught with challenges, including rogue dust bandits, transport mishaps, and the ever-present threat of dust allergies. Transporting dust from rural collection sites to urban markets was an art form in itself. Guild members would often use burlap sacks to carry dust, but these sacks were notoriously leaky. It wasn't uncommon for a merchant to arrive at the market with half of their precious cargo scattered along the cobbled streets. To combat this, some guilds employed a system of dust bearers, highly skilled individuals whose sole job was to ensure that dust remained intact during transit. Imagine a medieval version of a UPS driver, but instead of packages, they were hauling dust and praying to the gods of cleanliness that they wouldn't be ambushed by a wayward gust of wind. The supply chain logistics didn't stop there. Once the dust reached the market, it had to be displayed in a way that didn't scream, "I'm just a pile of dirt." Merchants would often set up elaborate booths, complete with colorful banners and fine silks, to showcase their dust. This was a time when marketing was an art, and a well-displayed pile of dust could bring in more customers than the finest silks. #### record keeping with lots of specifics. Now, let's delve deeper into the nitty-gritty of record keeping, because what's history without a good list, or 10? The guilds took meticulous care to document every aspect of the dust life cycle. Each inspection was logged in triplicate, one copy for the guild, one for the merchant, and a third to be sent to the local authority. These logs were often written in a cursive script that only a scribe could decipher, making it a challenge for even the most dedicated dust enthusiasts to follow along. Every inspection report included a breakdown of the dust's origins, texture, and even potential allergens. For instance, if a batch of dust was found to contain excessive amounts of mildew from the old tavern, it would be marked with a bright red X, and the merchant would be instructed to dispose of it immediately. In some cases, the guilds would even provide a rating system, akin to today's 5-star reviews. 3 stars for odor, but 4 for fluffiness, one might read, making dust sound like a gourmet delicacy rather than a common irritant. ###One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, as we approach the climax of our dusty saga, allow me to regale you with a rather surprising, and borderline grotesque, anecdote from the annals of dust inspection history. Picture this. The year is 1432, and the city of Ghent is embroiled in a scandal that would make even the most hardened medieval gossipers clutch their pearls in shock. A prominent merchant, known for his high-quality dust, was found to be cutting corners, literally. Instead of sourcing his dust from reputable locations, he had taken to collecting it from the local public lavatories. Yes, you read that right. The merchant had discovered that the dust in these establishments was finer and fluffier, making it a perfect candidate for his textile trade. The smell? Well, that was just a minor inconvenience. When the guild's inspection team arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt their dreams. As the team members sifted through the merchant's wares, they quickly identified an odor so foul that even the bravest among them turned green. The scandal erupted, leading to a public trial that would go down in history as the Great Dust Scandal of Ghent. The merchant was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to a month of public service, cleaning the very lavatories he had sourced his dust from. Talk about poetic justice. ###conclusion. So there you have it, dear reader, the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, where the mundane meets the utterly bizarre. From regional variations and intricate laws to logistical challenges and grotesque anecdotes, the world of medieval dust was anything but dull. While we may now roll our eyes at the notion of dust inspections, it's crucial to remember that the past was built on the backs of those who cared deeply, perhaps a bit too deeply, about the quality of the dust that surrounded them. Next time you find yourself swatting away a dust bunny, take a moment to appreciate the rich tapestry of history behind that seemingly insignificant particle. Who knows? You might just find yourself longing for the days when a little dust could make or break a merchant's fortune. Dust, it seems, has a history worth celebrating, one slightly less glamorous than knights in shining armor, but just as vital to the survival of society. Hashtag the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. Ah, the medieval era. A time when knights roamed the land, peasants toiled in the fields, and dust was, not to put too fine a point on it, seriously underappreciated. While the world was busy battling dragons and plotting royal assassinations, an equally epic saga was unfolding in the realm of guilds and the dust they produced. Yes, you heard that right, dust. Not the kind you sweep under the rug, but the kind that required a rigorous inspection protocol, one so lackluster it could make a bureaucrat weep tears of joy. Hashtag regional variations over time. Let's embark on a whimsical journey across medieval Europe, where dust wasn't just a nuisance but a matter of great concern to guilds and their members. Much like the finest wines or the most bewildering cheeses, the dust produced by guilds varied dramatically from region to region. In Italy, for instance, the dust generated by the famed glass-blowing guilds was as fine as the finest talcum powder, while in England, the dust from blacksmiths was, how shall we say this, a bit more robust, possibly containing the remnants of last night's ale. In Paris, the Guild of Bakers was known to produce a flour dust so fluffy that it could practically float away on a gentle breeze. The city's dust inspectors, armed with little more than a feather and a magnifying glass, would examine this powder with the seriousness of a scientist studying a new element. In contrast, the dust from the tanneries in Germany was so pungent and thick it could choke a horse, if horses were known to have any sense of smell, that is. The regional variations led to a patchwork of laws and edicts, each more humorously absurd than the last. For example, in 13th century Florence, a law mandated that all dust generated by the Guild of Stonemasons must be collected and stored in a designated dust vault. Why, you ask? To preserve the integrity of the city's architecture, of course. Because nothing says sustainable urban planning quite like a vault full of dust. Hashtag laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers. Speaking of laws, let's talk about the bureaucratic circus that surrounded dust inspection. In a world where the phrase, paper trail, didn't quite exist, guilds found themselves drowning in a sea of ledgers, scrolls, and decrees. Each guild was required to maintain meticulous records of their dust production, which were often recorded in ledgers that were more ornate than a royal scroll but about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Edicts were issued with great fanfare, often accompanied by grand proclamations from local lords. One particularly memorable decree stated that any guild found to be producing excessive dust would be fined a sum equivalent to the price of 3 pigs. Imagine the medieval accountant trying to calculate the dust output of a guild while simultaneously figuring out how many pigs they could buy. The mental gymnastics alone could fuel a small revolution. Taxes were levied based on dust production. Yes, you read that right. Dust was taxed as if it were a precious commodity, leading guilds to be creative in their dust management. Some guilds even resorted to hiring dust whisperers, who would ensure that their dust output remained below the tax threshold. These clever individuals wielded brooms and dustpans like swords, engaging in covert operations to sweep away any evidence of excessive dust. Hashtag logistics and supply chains. Now, if you think the logistics of dust inspection were straightforward, think again. The supply chains involved in dust production could make modern logistics planners weep with envy, or confusion, depending on how much ale they had consumed. Consider the Guild of Potters in medieval Spain. Their dust was generated not only from clay but also from the remnants of previous projects. The logistics of transporting this dust from one location to another became an art form in itself. Potters would engage in fierce negotiations with local transport guilds, arguing over the best routes to take, how to avoid the dreaded dust bandits, and the optimal number of donkeys required to carry the dust without spilling it all over the road. Meanwhile, in England, the Guild of Candle Makers faced a different kind of logistical nightmare. The wax dust produced during the crafting process was so sticky that it would adhere itself to anything in sight. Transporting this dust required a fleet of specially designed carts with walls coated in a peculiar mixture of tar and feathers to keep the dust from escaping. Imagine the conversations around the marketplace. "Oh, what's that smell?" "Ah, just the local candle guild's dust cart, don't mind the residue." Hashtag record keeping with lots of specifics. Ah, record keeping, the bane of every guild member's existence. The dusty scrolls and ledgers produced by these guilds read like the most tedious of novels. Each entry detailed the dust produced, the methods of collection, and even the specific materials used in the production process. On the 14th day of April, in the year of our Lord 1325, the Guild of Weavers generated 15 pounds of wool dust, which was then collected by our esteemed dust master, Sir Reginald the Overzealous. And let's not forget the Guild's Dust Quality Assurance program. Yes, there were inspectors who scrutinized the dust with a level of detail that could rival a modern-day food critic. They would examine the dust for color, texture, and even aroma. The record books would contain entries such as, "The dust generated on the first Tuesday of May was deemed to have a pleasing earthy aroma, while the dust from the following week resembled that of a damp sock left in a dark corner." Not only did guilds keep meticulous records of their own dust, but they also had to track the dust output of rival guilds. Dust espionage, it seems, was a real concern. Members would often sneak into competitor workshops to take samples of their dust and compare them to their own. A guild's reputation often hinged on the quality of their dust. Who knew it could be such a dramatic affair? One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, for the piece de resistance, a surprising and borderline grotesque anecdote that encapsulates the absurdity of medieval dust inspection protocols. In the late 14th century, a small village in England became embroiled in a scandal that would echo through the ages. One fateful day, the local dust inspector, a rather rotund man named Barnabas the Blustery, arrived at the Guild of Bakers, ready to conduct his routine inspection. However, unbeknownst to him, the guild had recently been experimenting with a new recipe for a particularly fluffy bread. In their excitement, they had inadvertently created a dust storm of epic proportions, quite literally. As Barnabas began his inspection, the dust enveloped him like a fluffy cloud, causing him to sneeze violently. Each sneeze sent a plume of flour dust spiraling into the air, creating an unintended blizzard of baked goods. The villagers, thinking it was a sign from the heavens, flocked to the bakery, believing they would be showered with loaves of bread. In the frenzy, however, chaos ensued. Barnabas, now a walking dust cloud, found himself being mistaken for a local deity. The villagers began to worship him, believing he possessed magical powers that could bless them with endless bread. Meanwhile, Barnabas was just trying to escape the clutches of flour-induced euphoria, and the Guild of Bakers was left trying to explain to the increasingly bewildered crowd that they were indeed not godlike, but merely master bakers with a penchant for excess dust. In the aftermath of this dusty debacle, a new law was enacted. All guilds were required to implement dust containment protocols. This law mandated that all dust produced during inspections be contained within a designated dust zone, an area that quickly became known as the Flowery Fiasco. #conclusion. So there you have it, a glimpse into the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. A saga filled with regional variations, absurd laws, logistical nightmares, and record-keeping that would make even the most dedicated accountant weep. And let's not forget the surprising anecdote that reminds us that even in the most mundane of practices, there's always room for a bit of chaos and hilarity. As we continue to dust off the pages of history, let's remember the unsung heroes of the medieval guilds, the dust inspectors, the bakers, and the potters, who, in their quest for cleanliness, inadvertently created a legacy of dust that still lingers in the annals of history. Dust may not have been the stuff of legends, but it certainly left its mark, one lackluster inspection at a time. #The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. Medieval guild dust inspection protocols, a topic that really sets the heart a-pounding and the mind a-sprinting towards the nearest exit. While most people are busy romanticizing knights in shining armor, frail maidens, and the occasional dragon-slaying escapade, lurking in the shadows of history is a far grittier, and, dare I say, dustier, tale. Dust inspections, you see, were the unsung heroes of medieval commerce, ensuring that the fine wares produced by guilds across Europe didn't contain, say, an alarming amount of actual dirt. As we journey through this riveting landscape of regulations, taxes, and record-keeping that could put even the most steadfast insomniac to sleep, let's keep our wits about us. After all, if you can't find humor in the minutiae of medieval bureaucracy, can you even call yourself a historian? Regional variations, a dusty patchwork quilt. First, let's take a moment to appreciate the regional variations in dust inspection protocols. You might think that dust, being a rather universal concept, would have a standardized approach across the medieval world. But oh, how wrong you are. Picture a patchwork quilt of regulations that would make even the most seasoned bureaucrat weep with joy or horror, depending on their affinity for paperwork. In Paris, for instance, the dust inspection protocols were a well-oiled machine, albeit one that was constantly breaking down from overuse. The guilds here were subjected to a plethora of edicts, some of which mandated inspections twice a month. Inspectors, armed with little more than a feather duster and a misplaced sense of authority, poked around in the corners of workshops to ensure that no rogue particles of dust could infiltrate the wares being sold to the good citizens of the city. Meanwhile, in London, the approach was far less regimented. Dust inspections were more of a "you scratch my back I'll scratch yours" affair. Guild leaders often greased the palms of inspectors to overlook minor infractions. A little dust here, a little dust there, what's the harm, right? This laissez-faire attitude sometimes led to the sale of goods that were more dust than product, but hey, who doesn't love a good bargain? Traveling eastward to the Holy Roman Empire, we find yet another layer of absurdity in the dust inspection saga. Here, regional lords often imposed their own inspection laws, leading to a chaotic melange of rules that left guilds scratching their heads and inspectors tearing their hair out. In some regions, the laws around dust were so convoluted that they almost seemed to require a degree in medieval law just to interpret. Is this a speck of dust or a fine powder? Became the stuff of existential crises for many a hapless inspector. ###### laws, edicts, taxes, and the dusty ledger. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of laws and edicts. Medieval guilds were often bound by a bevy of regulations that governed not just quality control but also the very nature of their existence. Entry into a guild was a rite of passage, much like a medieval frat initiation, but with less beer and more dust. To become a full member, one had to prove their mettle by passing a dust inspection. Yes, you read that correctly. It wasn't enough to be a master craftsman, you also had to demonstrate that your workshop was fit for human habitation, which, in the medieval world, was saying something. These laws were often accompanied by taxes levied on goods that failed inspection. If your guild's dust levels exceeded acceptable norms, you could expect to cough up a hefty fee, which was then recorded in the dusty ledgers that would make even the most meticulous accountant weep for joy. These ledgers were a historian's dream, filled with the minutiae of daily life and serving as a testament to the guild's triumphs and failures, mostly failures, if we're being honest. The sheer volume of record-keeping was staggering. Every dust inspection was meticulously documented, detailing the type of dust, its origin, and even the emotional state of the inspector at the time of evaluation. Inspectors note, slightly annoyed by the persistent presence of cat hair. Yes, even in the medieval world, cats were a source of both joy and chaos. Guild leaders would often gather to compare their ledgers, engaging in a sort of medieval, keeping up with the Joneses. Ah, your dust levels are alarmingly low this quarter. What's your secret? Well, I did bribe the inspector with a fine hem. Works like a charm. As tax collectors made their rounds, they would scrutinize these records, ensuring that no dust-related income slipped through the cracks. If you thought tax season was stressful now, try being a guild member in the Middle Ages. Between dust inspections, taxes, and the ever-looming threat of the Black Death, it's a miracle anyone got anything done. Hashtag logistics and supply chains, a dusty road to success. Logistics and supply chains in the medieval guild system were a tangled web of relationships that often revolved around dust inspections. Think of it as a medieval version of a supply chain management course, but instead of learning about just-in-time delivery, you were learning how to deliver goods that didn't contain more dust than actual product. Transporting goods from one guild to another required meticulous planning. If a shipment failed its dust inspection, it could mean disaster for the guild involved. Goods were often inspected at various stages of transport, leading to an elaborate dance of logistics that would put modern shipping companies to shame. Imagine a caravan of goods making its way from the bustling markets of Florence to the quaint streets of Ghent. Halfway through the journey, an inspector sets up camp to perform a surprise check. What's this? A fine layer of dust on your laces? I'm afraid I'll have to confiscate your entire shipment. And just like that, what should have been a profitable venture turned into a dust apocalypse. To combat this, guilds often developed intricate networks of trusted inspectors who would give a thumbs up or thumbs down based on personal relationships rather than actual dust content. Ah, Sir Geoffrey, I see you've brought me a lovely shipment of silk. How about we overlook that dust for a pint at the tavern later? This sort of amicable corruption made the logistics of dust inspections a delicate balance of relationships and regulations. The supply chains were so intertwined that one guild's success was often contingent on another's ability to keep their dust levels in check. If the blacksmith's dust levels were too high, the shoemaker would be left with subpar materials, and the next thing you know, the town's horses are all sporting badly crafted shoes that clop and clatter like they're auditioning for a comedic play. Hashtag record keeping, the monks and their dusty tomes. Ah, the monks, the true unsung heroes of record keeping in the medieval guild dust inspection saga. While most people picture monks as solemn figures hunched over illuminated manuscripts, they were often the ones responsible for documenting the dust inspection protocols in all their dusty glory. These devoted scribes meticulously recorded every detail of the inspections, crafting ledgers that would become the envy of future historians. Oh, look at this, an inspection from 1352. It details how Brother Barnabas found a shocking amount of dust in the cobbler's workshop. What a scandal! The sheer amount of information accumulated by these monks was staggering. They logged everything from the dustiest guilds to the most egregious violations, serving as both record keepers and, ironically, dust enthusiasts. Their writings included detailed descriptions of the types of dust found, flour dust, sawdust, even the occasional, mystery dust, a term that strikes fear into the hearts of guild members everywhere. However, the humor in all this record-keeping lies in the fact that some monks took it upon themselves to embellish the tales of dust inspections. And lo, a great cloud of dust descended upon the workshop, causing the master craftsman to weep bitterly as he realized his wares were unfit for sale. One can only imagine the eye rolls of the guild members reading these tomes. Sure, brother, blame the dust for your shoddy craftsmanship. Hashtag 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 a surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, dear reader, we must address the elephant in the room, or rather the grotesque anecdote that haunts the annals of guild dust inspection history. Picture this. It's the year 1376, and a particularly overzealous inspector has made his rounds in a small town in England. He's on a mission to root out the most egregious dust offenders, which, as it turns out, were the local bakers. The bakers, known for their fine bread, had been skimping on cleaning protocols, leading to an alarming amount of flour dust accumulating in their workshops. Now, in the midst of the inspection, the inspector, a man who had apparently taken it upon himself to be the moral compass of the medieval world, decides to dig a little deeper. He's convinced that the bakers are hiding something. In a moment that can only be described as both shocking and slightly hilarious, he orders the bakers to empty their flour bins for inspection. As the flour pours out, it becomes abundantly clear that not only were they hiding an impressive quantity of dust, but also a family of mice who had made a cozy home among the grains. The townspeople, gathered in hushed anticipation, witnessed the great dust and mice debacle unfold before their eyes. The inspector, aghast, declares the bakers unfit to sell their goods, resulting in an immediate town-wide ban on their bread. The moral? If you're going to skimp on dust inspections, at least make sure you're not also harboring a mouse family in your flour bin. In the end, the bakers learned their lesson, but the story of the great dust and mice scandal became the stuff of legend, often retold in taverns over mugs of ale. Hashtag 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 conclusion, the dust that built a civilization. As we conclude our whirlwind tour through the mind-numbing, yet oddly captivating world of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, one thing is abundantly clear: dust may be just a collection of particles, but it helped shape the medieval economy in ways that would make any modern economist weep with envy. From regional variations to logistics and supply chains, the tale of dust inspections is a testament to the tangled web of regulations that governed every aspect of life during this tumultuous time. So the next time you find yourself in a dusty workshop, remember the guilds of yore and their valiant efforts to keep their dust levels in check. After all, it's not just dust, it's history. And if we're lucky, it might even come with a side of laughter. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, a whimsical exploration. Picture this: a bustling medieval marketplace buzzing with the clamor of merchants, the aroma of fresh bread, and the occasional waft of something decidedly less appetizing. But wait, what's that? A cloaked figure with a clipboard, or whatever passed for one back then, approaches a stall overflowing with tantalizing goods. No, this isn't the medieval version of the IRS, it's the dust inspector, and he's here to ensure that all guilds are adhering to the strictest of dust inspection protocols. Yes, folks, welcome to the thrilling world of medieval guild dust inspection protocols, a surprisingly riveting spectacle of regional variations, laws, logistics, and the occasional grotesque anecdote. Hashtag 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 regional variations over time. Dust makes the world go round. To understand the dust inspection protocols, one must first appreciate the regional variations that existed during the medieval period. Like a fine wine, the dust of the time came in various blends, influenced by local artisans, environmental conditions, and the occasional pigeon dropping. In England, for instance, the Guild of Dusty Bastards, okay, not the actual name, but it had a similar ring to it, was notorious for its stringent regulations. Dust wasn't just dust, it was a currency, a mark of quality. The more refined the dust, the more prestigious the guild. Meanwhile, in Italy, the Guild of Dusty Artisans took a more relaxed approach, believing that a little grit added character. In fact, artisan bakers were known to sprinkle a bit of flour on their products before selling them, intentionally blurring the lines between acceptable dust and deliciously dubious dust. In the grand tapestry of guilds across Europe, each region developed its own unique interpretation of dust. The French guilds, for instance, took a more artistic approach. Their dust inspection protocols were less about cleanliness and more about aesthetic value. Dust was often assessed based on its ability to enhance the overall presentation of goods. If a loaf of bread didn't have the right sprinkle of brownish dust, it could be deemed unworthy of the marketplace, leading to a tragic fate of being fed to the pigs, or worse, becoming a prop for a local jester. ##### laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, the bureaucratic ballet. Ah, the law! A necessary evil that governed the lives of medieval folk, and dust was no exception. Across the continent, local lords and kings took it upon themselves to issue edicts concerning dust inspections, creating a veritable ballet of bureaucracy. These laws were often convoluted, leaving guild members scratching their heads and pondering the meaning of life as they tried to decipher the latest edict. In 1378, King Edward III of England issued an infamous decree known as the Dusty Decree, which mandated that all guilds must maintain detailed ledgers documenting their dust collection practices. Each guild had to record the type of dust collected, the source, and the intended use. Failure to comply could result in hefty fines or, in extreme cases, public shaming. Imagine being paraded through town with a sign reading, "I am a dusty defector," hanging around your neck. Taxes on dust became an unexpected revenue stream for many rulers. In Flanders, for instance, the dust tax was levied on any merchant selling goods that failed to meet the required dust standards. This led to a peculiar scenario where merchants hired dust consultants, individuals who specialized in ensuring that their wares were dusted to perfection, all while avoiding the dreaded tax collector lurking around the corner. #### logistics and supply chains, the dusty economy. As with all things medieval, logistics were key. The movement of dust, and the goods it adorned, was a complex web involving merchants, craftsmen, and, of course, the ever-watchful inspectors. Dust was collected from various sources: the floors of workshops, the corners of bakeries, and even the remnants left behind by the occasional mouse. The idea was to repurpose this dust, as throwing it away would be akin to tossing out gold coins. Guilds often established intricate supply chains to ensure a steady flow of acceptable dust. For instance, The Guild of Dusty Weavers in Germany maintained a network of dust gatherers who scoured the streets for the finest dust remnants. They would collect dust from the looms and bring it back to the main workshop, where it was meticulously categorized by color, texture, and aroma. Yes, aroma, because who wouldn't want to sniff some artisanal dust before deciding to sprinkle it over their freshly baked bread? The supply chain logistics didn't stop there. Once the dust was collected, it had to be transported to markets. This often involved carts pulled by horses, which, let's face it, had their own issues, including the occasional, unplanned deposit, that added a whole new layer of complexity to the dust collection process. Imagine trying to explain to your guild's inspector why your dust had a hint of hay and oats mixed in. It's all part of the blend, I swear. Hashtag record keeping, the dust diaries. Ah, record keeping. The backbone of any successful guild dust inspection protocol. Guilds were required to keep meticulous records of their dust, documenting everything from collection dates to inspection results. The dust diaries, as they were affectionately called, became the pride and joy of many guilds. One notable record keeper, a scribe named Alaric, who, legend has it, had an unhealthy obsession with cleanliness, took it upon himself to create a comprehensive ledger detailing every aspect of dust collection. His entries were exhaustive, including sections like dust quality assessment, dust aesthetic value, and dust-related complaints. Alaric even introduced a grading system, B, C, and, in some rare cases, dust of shame, which indicated a catastrophic failure to meet guild standards. Yet, it wasn't just Alaric's diligence that made record-keeping an endeavor of note. Some guilds had to get creative when it came to documenting their dust. In a particularly humorous incident, the Guild of Dusty Carpenters employed a local bard to write epic poems about their dust collection practices. These ballads were sung in taverns, ensuring that the tales of their dust adventures lived on in the annals of history, because nothing says prestige like a drunken bard crooning about your guild's dust collection efforts. Hashtag a surprising anecdote, the dusty catastrophe. No exploration of medieval guild dust inspection protocols would be complete without a surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Enter the infamous, Great Dust Catastrophe of 1423, a tale that has been whispered through the ages and is often covered in layers of dust, pun intended. In the town of Bruges, the Guild of Dusty Bakers was renowned for their exquisite pastries, each delicately dusted to perfection. However, one fateful day, disaster struck. The guild's head baker, a man named Gunter, had been experimenting with a new technique involving the incorporation of heavenly dust, a euphemism for an unusual blend of sugar and flour. Unfortunately, in a moment of sheer negligence, Gunter mistook a bag of the guild's carefully collected, inspected dust for the heavenly dust. The result? A batch of pastries that not only looked magnificent but also had a texture reminiscent of concrete and a taste that could only be described as an assault on the senses. As the unsuspecting townsfolk bit into these abominations, chaos ensued. People began to gag and cough, and a group of disgruntled customers stormed the guild hall, demanding explanations. The guild's reputation hung by a thread, leading to a swift investigation by the local dust inspector. In a bizarre twist, the dust inspector found that the offending pastries contained traces of a rare mold that had been collecting in the guild's dust storage area. This mold, it turned out, was not just any mold, it had hallucinogenic properties. As a result, the townsfolk who had sampled the pastries began to experience vivid hallucinations, claiming they could see the spirits of long-dead bakers dancing in the streets. The incident became a legendary tale, forever cementing Gunter's name in the annals of dust history. The guild implemented stricter dust inspection protocols, and Gunter, now known as Gunter the Gagging, spent the rest of his days as a cautionary tale among bakers. Conclusion, the dust of history. So, there you have it, a whimsical journey through the lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. From regional variations and bureaucratic ballet to the logistics of dust supply chains and the meticulous record-keeping that would make even the most ardent accountant weep tears of joy, the world of dust inspections was a remarkable, if slightly absurd, aspect of medieval life. Indeed, the legacy of these protocols has long since settled into the dust of history, yet their impact lingers, reminding us that even the most mundane aspects of life can be laden with intrigue, humor, and the occasional grotesque twist. As we sweep away the cobwebs of time, we find that the dust of our past is not merely a nuisance but a testament to the creativity, chaos, and camaraderie that defined the medieval guilds. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to find a good dusting cloth for my own medieval-inspired bakery, just in case Gunter the Gagging decides to pay me a visit. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. The medieval period, often romanticized for its knights, castles, and chivalry, also bore witness to the more mundane yet equally fascinating intricacies of daily life. Among these intricacies lay the often overlooked world of guilds, associations of artisans and merchants who sought to regulate their various crafts through a complex web of rules and standards. One of the more peculiar yet essential aspects of these regulations was the inspection of dust. Yes, dust. This might seem trivial in the grand tapestry of history, yet the protocols surrounding dust inspection reveal much about the social, economic, and cultural fabric of medieval society. Minor figures and petty rules. Within the labyrinthine world of guild regulations, minor figures emerged as champions of dust inspection. Take, for instance, the notorious Dust Master of 14th-century London, a title held by a series of often overlooked individuals tasked with ensuring that the dust produced by workshops and trades did not contaminate the quality of goods. These dust masters were often chosen from the ranks of lesser guild members, sometimes even being the apprentices or the third sons of artisans who had failed to make a name for themselves. The dust master's role was not only to inspect the dust but also to enforce a range of petty rules that governed its management. For example, one regulation required that all dust produced by bakers be disposed of in designated dust bins of purity, which were often little more than wooden boxes with a slatted base to allow for drainage. Failure to comply could lead to hefty fines or, in some extreme cases, the temporary revocation of a guild's charter. The plethora of rules could boggle the mind. The Weavers' Guild of Ghent, for example, had a detailed regulation stating that any weaver found with more than a pinch of lint in their workshop shall forfeit a loaf of bread to the local poor. Such seemingly innocuous rules were designed to promote cleanliness and maintain the quality of the products. However, they often devolved into petty squabbles among guild members, with accusations flying faster than one could sweep up a dust bunny. ####Case studies with dates and lists. Case studies illuminate just how far-reaching these dust inspection protocols could be. In the records of the Flemish Clothiers' Guild from 1382, we find a series of complaints that culminated in what can only be described as the dust riots of Bruges. The guild had implemented a strict policy mandating that all cloth makers must clean their workshops daily or face fines. By November of that year, a group of disgruntled cloth makers banded together and refused to comply, claiming the regulations were overly burdensome and detrimental to their craft. The following is a summarized timeline of events. November 1, 1382, the Guild announces the new dust inspection policy. November 15, 1382, the first fines are levied against non-compliant members. November 20, 1382, a coalition of cloth makers meets to discuss resistance. November 30, 1382, the dust riots erupt, leading to a chaotic confrontation with guild officials. December 5, 1382, the guild relents and amends the dust inspection policy, allowing 4 dust days, where workshops could operate without inspection. This case illustrates how seemingly minor regulations could incite significant unrest, underscoring the tension between authority and autonomy within guilds. Comparisons to other regions. While the protocols surrounding dust inspection were stringent in places like England and the Low Countries, they were markedly different in other regions. In Italy, for instance, the guilds of Florence took a more laissez-faire approach. Dust was largely regarded as an inevitable byproduct of craftsmanship, and the Florentine Guild of Artisans focused more on the overall quality of the finished product rather than the cleanliness of the workspace. In contrast, the German guilds of the Holy Roman Empire enforced dust inspection with a fervor that bordered on obsession. In 1370, the Nuremberg Guild of Blacksmiths established a committee dedicated solely to dust oversight. This committee could impose fines, but it also had the authority to require blacksmiths to attend dust etiquette seminars, where they were taught the fine art of dust management. One such seminar in 1395 featured a guest speaker, a renowned blacksmith from Cologne, who expounded on the 3 pillars of dust control, which included the importance of regular sweeping, proper disposal techniques, and the psychological benefits of a clean workspace. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological evidence lends credence to the significance of these dust inspection protocols. Excavations at medieval workshops in major cities like Paris and London have uncovered remnants of dust bins and cleaning tools that were clearly designed for compliance with guild regulations. One particularly fascinating find in a Parisian cobbler's workshop from the late 1400s revealed a set of small, intricately carved dust brushes that suggested not only a commitment to cleanliness but also a surprising level of artistry among even the most humble of trades. Moreover, The discovery of guild charters and ledgers in the ruins of guild halls has provided insight into the bureaucratic structure surrounding dust inspections. These documents often contain detailed lists of fines levied against members for dust-related infractions, often accompanied by humorous or scathing remarks from guild officials. A ledger from the late 1300s records a particularly biting comment: "For every grain of dust, a soul lost in the pursuit of cleanliness." ####The role of women and minorities. Interestingly, the role of women and minorities in the guild dust inspection narrative is often overlooked. In many regions, women played a crucial role in the textile and baking guilds, and their workshops were subjected to the same dust regulations. However, the enforcement of these regulations often fell to men, leading to a unique dynamic in which women had to navigate both the expectations of cleanliness and the gender biases of the time. In some guilds, women were even appointed as dust overseers, a position that allowed them to influence the dust regulations that directly affected their livelihood. For instance, in the late 15th century, a woman named Marguerite de la Roche became a prominent figure in the Rouen Bakers' Guild, advocating for more lenient dust inspection protocols. Her efforts were noted in the guild records, which acknowledged her as a fierce protector of the oven's cleanliness, and she was instrumental in reducing the fines for dust infractions among bakers. Rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. But why, you might ask, did dust become such a focal point for medieval guilds? Was it merely a matter of cleanliness, or did it signify deeper societal values? Furthermore, what does the obsession with dust tell us about the broader context of labor, craftsmanship, and social hierarchy in medieval Europe? Conclusion. The history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols is a microcosm of the complexities and quirks of life in the Middle Ages. From the petty rules enforced by minor figures to the broader societal implications of these regulations, dust inspection serves as a lens through which we can explore the lives of artisans and merchants. As we sweep aside the layers of history, we are reminded that even the most mundane aspects of life can reveal profound truths about the human condition and the societies we build around ourselves. So, the next time you encounter a speck of dust, consider the legacy of those who once toiled to keep it at bay, and reflect on how such seemingly trivial matters can shape the course of history. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. In the annals of medieval history, few topics evoke as much ambivalence as the dust inspection protocols of guilds. While the grand narratives of kings, battles, and discoveries often overshadow the mundane, the protocols surrounding the regulation of dust, yes, dust, offer a unique glimpse into the everyday lives of those who toiled in the shadow of towering cathedrals and bustling marketplaces. Minor figures and petty rules. Amidst the towering figures of history, the minor players in the world of guild dust inspection often went unnoticed. One such figure was Ethelbert of Ashford, a minor guild inspector in 14th-century England whose only claim to fame was the infamous Ethelbert's Edict of 1372. This decree mandated that all bakers must sweep their floors every morning before dawn and present the dust collected to the guild for inspection. Failure to comply could result in a fine of 2 pence, an amount equivalent to a loaf of bread at the time. The edict was a response to the growing concern that dust could contaminate flour, thereby compromising the quality of bread. Ethelbert's primary concern was not health, but the burgeoning competition among bakers. The Guild's motto, "A clean floor equals a clean conscience," became a rallying cry for those who sought to elevate their products above the rest, regardless of how trivial the means might have been. ####Case studies with dates and lists. The dust inspection protocols varied significantly across different guilds and regions, but case studies offer insight into the absurdity of these regulations. 1. The Bakers' Guild of London, 1375. Inspection criteria: each baker was required to produce a dust report that outlined the following. Total amount of dust collected from the floor, measured in ounces. Number of days since the last thorough cleaning. Type of dust, flour dust, soot, or miscellaneous. Outcome: in 1375, Guild records show that 17 bakers faced fines for excessive flour dust, leading to a public shaming event where offenders were required to wear signs stating their dust-related crimes. 2. The Weavers' Guild of Ghent, 1420. Inspection protocols: the weavers had a more elaborate system that included a weekly dust collection contest, where the weaver with the least amount of dust won a silver thimble. Monthly inspections by the dust master, a position that was often filled by the least popular member of the guild. Significant event: in 1420, a scandal erupted when dust master Hubert van Dyck was found to have been collecting dust samples and secretly selling them to a rival guild. This led to the infamous dust riot, which saw weavers storming the guild hall, demanding retribution. 3. The Tanners' Guild of Paris, 1455. Regulatory measures: tanners had to deal with both dust and the unpleasant odors associated with their trade. Their protocols included daily dust inspections alongside odor assessments. A dust penalty, enforced by the guild, which prescribed public humiliation for any tanner whose workshop was deemed excessively dusty. Notable incident: in 1455, the guild decreed a Dust Cleanliness Day, where all tanners had to join forces to clean the streets of Paris, showcasing their commitment to both cleanliness and public relations. What can we learn from these trivial yet telling case studies? Was the meticulous obsession with dust merely a reflection of the guild's desire to maintain a clean reputation, or was it a precursor to modern hygiene practices? Comparisons to other regions. While the medieval dust inspection protocols in England and the Low Countries were stringent, other regions exhibited a more laissez-faire attitude. In Italy, for example, guilds like the Arte della Seda, Silk Guild, focused on the quality of their products rather than the cleanliness of their workshops. The Florentine silk weavers were known to embrace a more artistic approach, often allowing a bit of dust to settle, believing it added character to their creations. Conversely, in the Iberian Peninsula, the dust inspection protocols took on a religious undertone. The guilds in cities like Toledo and Seville mandated that dust collection be accompanied by a prayer for cleanliness, with the belief that spiritual purity was intrinsically linked to physical cleanliness. Even more curious is the fact that the Japanese guilds of the same era had no dust inspection protocols. Instead, they focused on craftsmanship and the art of perfection. The Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, which finds beauty in imperfection, starkly contrasts with the obsessive cleanliness seen in European guilds. What led to such divergent attitudes towards dust and cleanliness? Archaeological tidbits. The archaeological record offers tantalizing insights into the dust inspection protocols of medieval guilds. Excavations of medieval bakeries often reveal layers of dust and debris, a testament to the rigorous cleaning practices employed by bakers. In York, for example, remnants of dust were found alongside well-preserved bread ovens, indicating that while cleanliness was enforced, it was not always successfully maintained. One particularly notable excavation in the heart of Ghent unearthed a series of wooden boxes marked with guild symbols, containing dust samples labeled with dates and names of guild members. These artifacts provide a direct link to the absurdity of the dust inspection protocols and showcase the lengths to which guilds went to ensure compliance. Additionally, a cache of documents found in a Parisian tanner workshop included a ledger detailing dust inspections and the resulting fines imposed on tanners for excessive dust accumulation. One entry, dated June 4, 1455, read, Jacques Leclerc fined 5 sous for dust mismanagement. Dust found in the dye pit was deemed unholy. Such records are invaluable for understanding the minutiae of guild life and the often overlooked aspects of daily existence. Rhetorical questions that hook curiosity. 1. What can the insignificant dust of medieval workshops teach us about the larger societal values and practices of the time? 2. How might our modern understanding of hygiene and cleanliness have been shaped by the absurd yet earnest practices of medieval guilds? Conclusion. The history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols is a fascinating study of the mundane intricacies of daily life, revealing the absurd lengths to which people would go to maintain their reputation and their craft. While the protocols may seem trivial, they were deeply intertwined with the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the time. The obsession with dust was not just about cleanliness, it was about competition, reputation, and the desire for quality in a world that was often dirty and chaotic. The legacy of these dust inspection protocols persists in modern regulations surrounding cleanliness and quality control, reminding us that even the smallest details can have profound implications for society. So next time you sweep your floor, consider the guilds of yore and the lengths they went to keep their dust in check. What might they think of our contemporary standards? Would they be impressed or horrified? In the grand tapestry of history, dust is perhaps one of the most telling threads of all. The lackluster history of medieval guild dust inspection protocols. The medieval period, often romanticized as a time of knights, chivalry, and grand cathedrals, was also marked by an intricate social structure heavily influenced by guilds. These associations of craftsmen and merchants played a crucial role in regulating trade, maintaining standards, and ensuring the quality of goods produced in their respective fields. Among the many mundane aspects of guild regulations, one of the most curious and overlooked was the protocol surrounding dust inspection. Yes, you read that correctly, dust inspection. This seemingly trivial aspect of guild oversight offers a fascinating glimpse into the minutiae of medieval life, revealing the peculiarities of minor figures, petty rules, and the stark contrasts between different regions. Minor figures and petty rules. In the grand tapestry of medieval society, the dust inspectors were often minor figures, the unsung heroes or, perhaps more aptly, the ignored footnotes of history. These individuals were often journeymen or apprentices who had yet to achieve the status of masters within their guilds. They were tasked with inspecting the dust generated by the production processes of their respective crafts, such as textiles, pottery, or metalworking. The existence of such a role may appear trivial today, yet it underscored the guild's commitment to quality control and consumer protection. For instance, in the Cloth Guild of Ghent, established in the late 12th century, inspectors were responsible for ensuring that the dust from wool processing met specific standards. They would measure the dust's weight, an elaborate process requiring a balance scale, small weights, and the keen eyes of a novice inspector. If the dust exceeded a certain threshold, it was deemed unacceptable, leading to a possible fine for the master craftsman. This petty regulation could lead to a cascade of consequences, including damage to a craftsman's reputation and financial loss. In a similar vein, the Potters' Guild of London in the early 14th century had a rule known as the dust of dishonor, which dictated that any pottery producing a surplus of dust would be deemed inferior. The guild's inspector, often a disgruntled apprentice, was tasked with the unenviable job of sifting through the fine particles to assess their quality. If the dust revealed signs of contamination or sourced from improper materials, the potter could face a committee hearing, a humiliating ordeal that might end in expulsion from the guild. Case studies with dates and lists. To fully appreciate the implications of these dust inspection protocols, we can examine specific case studies that highlight their impact on medieval commerce and craftsmanship. 1. Ghent Cloth Guild, 1276. In 1276, a notable incident occurred in the bustling market of Ghent when a master named Jan van der Velden was fined 10 shillings for excessive dust accumulation during wool processing. The inspector, a young apprentice named Peter, recorded the incident in the guild's ledger, which stated, "The dust of dishonor shall not rain upon our fair city." This event led to the establishment of the Dust Reduction Initiative, wherein members were required to install dust-collecting apparatuses in their workshops. 2. London Potters' Guild, 1343. A scandal emerged in 1343 when a potter named Eliza of Cripplegate was accused of producing too much dust during her pottery firing process. The guild inspector, known only as Bold Tom, discovered that her kiln was improperly vented, causing an explosion of dust that settled in the neighboring streets. The guild convened a tribunal, ultimately ruling in favor of Eliza, who argued, every artist must bear the dust of creation. However, she was still required to pay a fine of 5 pence for violating the dust protocol. 3. Florentine Goldsmiths, 1396. In 1396, the Florentine Goldsmiths Guild implemented an even more elaborate dust inspection protocol after a scandal involving counterfeit gold dust. A rogue goldsmith had been mixing less valuable metals with real gold, resulting in a dust that appeared authentic but failed to meet the guild standards. The inspector, a diligent man named Francesco, was able to identify the counterfeit dust through a series of tests involving both sight and smell. His report, titled "Of the Aroma of Authenticity," became a seminal document for guild regulations across Europe. These case studies illustrate not only the eccentricities of the dust inspection process but also the lengths to which guilds would go to maintain their reputations and the integrity of their crafts. Comparisons to other regions. While the dust inspection protocols of the Ghent Cloth Guild and the London Potters Guild are certainly peculiar, it is interesting to compare them to other regions and their approaches to dust management. In the Germanic states, for example, guilds took a more practical approach. The Bakers' Guild of Nuremberg in the late 13th century implemented a dust tax, wherein bakers were required to pay a small fee based on the amount of flour dust generated in their shops. This tax was then used to fund public sanitation efforts, reflecting a more communal approach to dust management. Contrastingly, in the Iberian Peninsula, particularly in the city of Toledo, the guilds approached dust from a more philosophical standpoint. The Toledo Silversmiths Guild mandated that all members must engage in a ritual known as the cleansing of the dust, which involved a week-long fast and meditation on the nature of craftsmanship. This introspective method acknowledged the spiritual implications of dust, intertwining the physical with the metaphysical. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have unearthed fascinating artifacts related to these dust inspection protocols. In Ghent, excavations in the early 2000s revealed a series of small ceramic vessels designed to collect dust from wool processing. These vessels, often intricately decorated, were likely used by guild inspectors to transport dust samples for analysis. One such vessel, now housed in the Ghent City Museum, features an inscription that translates to, "In dust we trust." In London, remnants of a potter's workshop have been discovered near the Thames, complete with a partially intact kiln. Among the debris, archaeologists found a collection of small weights used for weighing dust samples. These weights were inscribed with various guild symbols, indicating their ownership by different potters. This discovery provides tangible evidence of the rigorous standards that guilds enforced, as well as the social dynamics at play among craftsmen. Similarly, in Florence, a recent dig unveiled a series of ledgers belonging to the Goldsmiths Guild. These ledgers contain detailed accounts of dust inspections, including the names of inspectors and the fines imposed for violations. The meticulous nature of these records highlights the importance placed on dust management and quality control in medieval craftsmanship. Two rhetorical questions that hook curiosity. Is it not astonishing that something as seemingly trivial as dust could wield such power over the livelihoods of medieval craftsmen? What other overlooked aspects of daily life might reveal hidden complexities within the fabric of historical societies? In conclusion, the dust inspection protocols of medieval guilds are a fascinating lens through which to view the social dynamics, economic considerations, and artisanal practices of the time. The roles of minor figures, the peculiarities of petty rules, and the remarkable case studies illustrate how something as mundane as dust could have far-reaching implications. Comparing the practices across regions reveals the diversity of thought and approach, while archaeological discoveries ground these narratives in tangible reality. Thus, while guild dust inspection protocols may seem lackluster at first glance, they offer a rich tapestry of insights into the medieval world, inviting us to reconsider the trivialities of history that often go unnoticed. And that's a wrap. We dove deep into the world of topic, uncovering the secrets and surprising twists that keep us all hooked. Who knew that? Witty line related to the topic. Here's a surprising fact to chew on. Insert surprising closing fact here. It just goes to show that there's always more than meets the eye. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. We love hearing from you and your thoughts on today's topic. And if you're hungry for more, check out our related episodes. There's a treasure trove waiting for you. Lastly, hit that loop button to let this episode play on repeat until you drift off. Sweet dreams and see you next time.